Last Friday, the forecast out in the Chesapeake Bay, as I'm sure everyone follows the marine forecast as closely as I do, the forecast was 25 to 30 knots with gusts of 35 knots and seas of 4 to 5 feet. Now, if that doesn't mean anything to you, that's okay. But here's what that means. The Coast Guard calls that a small craft advisory. And as Jim and I were talking about it, because I was thinking about this when I spoke with him on Wednesday, that's a lot of wind. That is a lot. And so as I was over the course of the week watching the marine forecast, I was also reading and rereading our passage in Daniel. And I was reading a little more broadly in Daniel and about Daniel and what this passage could say to us today. And our reading depicts a vision of 4 winds from heaven that come and stir up a great sea. And so I was picturing the bay, which I've seen many times in great wind, as the bay is very shallow, so 4 to 5 foot seas are very sharp waves and often whitecaps as the wind takes the top of the wave and blows it off into a foamy surface. And I was picturing that scene and trying to imagine what Daniel might have seen in this nightmare. Maybe the idea of these beasts coming up as he saw from the waves isn't scary to you. Maybe that's a little too sci-fi, too remote. Maybe it feels like CGI or something that, well, I could just turn the TV off. The idea in Daniel 7, though, is meant to be reassurance in the face of our fears. It's supposed to be personal. Whatever you fear, Daniel 7 says, God's got this. God will use someone and find a creative solution. God's going to open doors, create a new plan, and probably do something you didn't expect in the first place. So pick your fear. Pick whatever it is that you carry with you. Pick whatever it is that you brought with you when you came into this space today and turn it over to God. Now, I realize as soon as the words come out of my mouth, that is easier said than done. There are so many things to provide fodder for our nightmares. I don't have to list them, nor do I want to encourage us to chase our fears into the rabbit holes of desperation and discouragement. Daniel saw these 4 huge creatures come up from the depths. And each was different from the other 3. The language reminds us of the great beasts of Leviathan and Rahab in Genesis coming out of the primordial sea. Scholars associate these beasts in Daniel with the 4 major threats that were facing ancient Israel at that time: the Babylonians, Medians, Persians, and Greeks. And again, when we situate it in the passage, it's easy for it to become distant from us, cold from our daily living, and isolated from the things we actually encounter. But by placing it there, in the time of the Babylonians, our reading opened up with a king and situating it in the Babylonian rule. Those first hearers would have had this feeling of subjugation invoked. For us, the passage invites us, though, instead to make it personal. See, all those names, Persians, Medians, that doesn't do anything for our nightmares, but you've got something. Everybody does. Daniel was a series of stories before we got to this vision, this nightmare. And each one basically fell into 2 categories. There were stories about interpretation or deliverance. And in the case of the stories of interpretation, here's how the formula they followed. The king had a dream. The wise people in the court couldn't figure it out. The hero emerges and gives an interpretation, and the hero is rewarded. And the king learns through this that the hero's God is all-powerful. The stories in Daniel 1 to 6 of deliverance followed a very similar formula. The king issues some order that commands the Jewish people to worship some idol. And then the hero or heroes get discovered disobeying. They refuse to comply, are sentenced to death, and then are delivered. They're rewarded and their enemies are punished. And again, the king learns that their God is all-powerful. Think in terms of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Daniel 3, or Daniel and in Daniel 6. Daniel and the lion's den in Daniel 6. So these are the stories that precede this vision, and this is what sets this up: interpretation and deliverance. And friends, we need some stories of interpretation today. When we confront our fears, we need something to make sense of them. We need something that can help us make sense of the world. Likewise, we need stories of deliverance. Man, oh man, do we need stories of deliverance right now. We need someone who's going to be able to tell us with some confidence and certainty that it's going to be okay. And the subversive message for today from Daniel is to keep hope alive. In the face of everything happening in the world today, live in faith and look to the future with an assurance of hope, an assurance of things that are yet to come, an assurance that what is yet to be will be okay. This message subverts the societal messages of nihilism, and it undermines giving in to fear. Hope goes against the destructive message of living in negativity, hate, and ugliness. So today, no matter what fears you've brought with you, God is going to do something. God's got a future. God's got something ahead of us that's brighter than the present. At the end of our reading in Daniel 7:18, it says, "The holy ones of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever." And everything around us suggests that doesn't seem to be the case. When we look at the world and try to read the tea leaves of our current world, it seems to suggest giving up hope. The news keeps getting worse, and to this anxiety-ridden nightmare of our hearts, Daniel gives a voice to our confusion. Daniel gives a voice to our struggle to understand, our desire to find interpretation and an assurance of deliverance. He says to the divine messenger in his dream, "I don't understand. I don't get it. What's going on here?" And then in our reading, one of the divine attendants explains it, saying that God is going to raise up leaders who are going to help. Who? Who's going to come and take away our fear? Who's going to come and solve our problem? Who are these leaders? Who's this talking about today? It's easy to look back and say, oh, well, see, everything was all right for them. What about us? The point in Daniel is that we don't know what's coming next, but we can live in faith and live in the confidence that God is God and we're not. God has the world in... Thank you. I knew Barbara had me on that one. Did everybody hear her? Choir? Well, you could have broken into it, but we didn't rehearse that. God's got the whole world. You guys are, I like that. And you know, I thought about this because it's easy for us to say that, but without some concrete examples, it's easy to forget that. God raised up a leader in the civil rights period of the 1960s when our country had an incredible amount of unrest in Martin Luther King Jr., who preached a message of nonviolence. God raised up other leaders like Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat, which launched the Montgomery bus boycott. This list goes on, including people who don't even fall under the banner of Christ followers. In India, Mahatma Gandhi also proclaimed a message of nonviolent resistance, and the British Empire, which at that time ruled the world, left. Malala Yousafzai advocated for female education in Afghanistan. And again, this list goes on and on and on. When people seem lost, when hope seems lost, God is still there. God's working. God is working even when we don't see it. God is working even when we don't notice it. God is there all the time, and God keeps working in the darkness. Just as it says at the beginning of the Gospel of John, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. So I'll end as I started. Today, pick a fear and give it to God. This only works if you pick one of your own very real fears. And it only works if you give it in faith to the God who constantly uses people to do good and change the world. Give your fears to the God who could deliver Daniel from the lion's den and raise Jesus from the dead. By giving our fears to God, we can start to overcome the frightening beasts and troubling spirits of our hearts. Amen.